Rose. I had Jean sign the contract.
Hi, Robert.
I'll try to get.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, Tammy. Hi, Ben. Hi, Louie.
Okay, I call the 18th meeting of the Board of Directors for the Valley Unified Education Service Center to order. Roll call.
Louis Dugal.
Here.
Gerard Castonguay.
Here.
Keith Jandro.
Here.
Tammy Toby.
Here.
Josh Desjardins.
Here.
Toby Jandro. Here. Rose McCory.
Here.
And Gary Sibley.
Here.
Any adjustments to the
I
agenda?
have no-
No adjustments. Nobody here to speak. There's no one here. Approval of the minutes. Approval of the 17th meeting on February 22. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Keith and Rose? Any discussion? All those in favor? Executive Director?
I just wanted to give you a couple of artifacts, and I did send them to you email, as well as all of your fellow board members. One of them is the first one is the exhibit VIIB, which comes right from the State Board of Education website, and it's just the statement of fact of why our project was removed from the integrated consolidated 9 to 16 priority list. And then the second one is a letter dated March 5, and that's directly from Commissioner Macon, also reiterating the same information. So I did want you to have those for your records. All I have for Val Unified updates. I don't know if any of the Val Unified administrators wanted to report out on anything. You're all set. Sharon, you all set?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay. You go. And Lucy, it's going to be your show in a little while. So.
Well done. Items of old business?
Last time we met, I did share with you the list of shared services. Since then, I have gone to the Mattawa School Committee, the SAD 27 board, and the SAD 33 board. None of the boards voted against the shared services. Mattawa did vote to approve them, as did 33. 27 chose not to take a position, and it's and I can let Mr. Sibley or Mr. Chandra speak if they want to, but I think the gist of it is because there are still unknowns, and because it does appear that even though one entity does not want certain services, it's not clear on how they can remove them if the other two parties still want them. And that's because you're the entity that approves these shared services, not the sending school boards. So my recommendation stands as it did when I met with all of you, that I think these services have proven to be beneficial to all three school districts, some more financially, some more in services that did not exist before. I think it would be wise to continue with the shared services. And I did share with all of you as well that there may be one of these administrative positions that I may be coming back to you with a reduction in services. And that's based on just some conversations about somebody's future employment and their plans. So there may be a savings coming from one of those as well as some reduction in services from one of those that I'm willing to pick up if that position is to be reduced. So I don't know if Mr. Sibley or Mr. John wanted to reiterate on what I said, or did I cover it?
I think you pretty much covered it. There's just a few things that you've answered at our previous SAD 27 meeting. You may still need a little bit of clarity going forward as far as where we want to go as a board. So I think that's where we kind of left that open-ended response and really didn't give a firm yea or nay. So.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. I think our board is in favor of continuing, wants to continue with the shared services, but just want to look over things and, with the school not being on the table anymore, that there's things we can streamline, probably money we can save. So before we really commit to something, we should look at those as a general feeling.
I'll kind of save the surprise. The budget that Lucy will present has no increase. Your budget will not. Sorry, Lucy. So in consideration of the shared services, we should know that we're not raising the budget. Sorry, Lucy.
Items of new business.
Did we want to?
Or we
Well,
taking a vote?
I mean, you can do it now, or you can do it at the budget. Essentially, if you approve the budget, then you're approving the shared services. So we might as well just wait for that at the end. I think it's appropriate to do it at that time when you see the numbers. I do have a list of meeting dates for 21, 22. I do not change the date. The date isn't correct. It's just 21, 22. Similar to what I did for all of your school board, is I look at the dates from this year and then try to match them up as best I can. I think the only one that moved a little is the January. It got back up a little bit. But essentially everything falls in line. We have three times to see the budget, and approval of the budget before March 15 is what our interlocal agreement says, so that lines up well. So that's what I'm recommending for meetings for next year.
Do I have a motion to approve the meeting dates for 21, 22? Josh and Mr. Estonia? Any discussion? All those in favor? Item B, interlocal agreement review, sections 11 to 17.
So yeah, last time we did look at sections 1 to 10. I did take those back to the school boards for discussion, and I'm compiling all of that so that at the end of this exercise, when we've gone through everything, we can talk about what all of the various boards said, subject to what you're recommending here at this table. I'm fine with reading through each one of these, but I believe you probably looked at them in advance, and I'm hoping that we can just quickly, well, not quickly, but we can save some time by just looking at an item, and if you have any concerns about that item, you can address it, and then we can move forward from that. Is that a good way to go about this? Yep. Rose?
Okay. Giselle had mentioned that we should change regional service center to education service center. And this is being done or will be done.
Yeah, the whole document will have to be gone through, and
Okay.
we'll just replace those words. Does anybody have an issue with fiscal agent? Essentially, fiscal agent is who manages the money aspect for Val Unified. Your fiscal agent is SCD 27, and that's simply because that's how we started, and that's because this central office does have more personnel that are able to help with those tasks. So fiscal agent, does anyone have an issue with that language? I'll move on to regional service center employer. Essentially, your service center can employ individuals under this agreement. We've stayed away from employing directly under Val Unified because There's contracts involved with professional personnel. There's also in creating, becoming an employer, and then you have to start examining, are you going to offer benefits and just health insurance for an example. If you have one employee, how do you offer a group health insurance plan with one employee? So we've been avoiding this. We have bus drivers who drive the Valley Unified bus, who we subcontract from the districts and pay out of Valley Unified. It's more like part-time employment, and that's because we pay a little bit more when they do drive the Valley Unified bus. But aside from that, we don't employ at this time. New members, associate members. So this gives you the right to allow new members from coming in. It would have to be by a vote of 2/3 of the full membership in order to bring in a new member. And members do not have to necessarily, under associate members, you don't necessarily have to be a school district. You can actually be like the town of Wallagrass could become an associate member if they felt that they could purchase services from our leadership center. I don't know if that would be a good fit, but it does allow for that. Since the beginning, I have not been approached to have any new members, although there was some discussion for a little while, I believe, with Allagash, the school board of Allagash examining, and I did exchange at least 1 or 2 emails with a resident of Allagash, but I've heard nothing since that time. It was probably a year ago. Number 14 is minimum member obligation. So essentially what that means is each member agrees to purchase all of the services, programs, and functions. So when we talk about what we're offering for shared services, per this document, you agree to purchase those if we're going to offer them. And this was part of the conversation that SED 27 was having as well, is that at what point can one group petition to not have such services, and what does that process look like? And I think that would have to be made here at this level. Non-member purchasers of services. You can provide functions, programs, and services to any school administrative unit. Essentially, we could offer services to a school unit in Kittery if we wanted to. You don't have to be a local school unit, as long as it's needing those services, and they would pay the cost and fees determined by you for those certain services. Let's say we did group oil bidding for our school districts under the Valley Unified Board. We could have somebody else, another entity who would want to join in on that oil bid, and they could purchase that service if you guys would agree to it. 16 is authority and powers. So it just outlines your organizational powers, your contracts, your employment of personnel, real and personal property, expenditures, and investments of funds, reserve funds, contingency funds, disposition of property and indebtedness, purchase of goods and services, acceptance of money and grants, acceptance and expenditure of state and federal funds, policies, borrowing, bond authority, and then no transfer of responsibility for provision of free public education. Out of all of these, right now, we've engaged in A, we have organizational powers, we have not B, we have no contracts, we have not C, no employment of personnel, we have no real and personal property with the exception of the Valley Unified bus.
Okay, I have a question.
Yep.
Under real and personal property.
Yep.
What is included?
So any possessions that we would own, like a school building or vehicles or any possessions, we don't own anything Right now, we simply offer services. Lucy, were you gonna say something?
No,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think the only real property we own would be the Valley Unified Bus. Do you think of anything else?
each district also received a minivan.
Okay, but we parse that out each
Right,
district.
and then there's a few computers
Yeah.
in the offices, so there's a few little
And an owl.
things like that.
And an owl.
And an owl, who happens to be sick.
Expenditures, yes, you authorize that. Investment of funds, we don't invest in any funds at this time. Reserve funds, contingency funds, we have no reserve or contingency funds under the service center. Disposition of property and indebtedness, we don't have property, we don't have debt. Purchase of goods and services, we really have defaulted to the school units to purchase goods and services. I don't think we've engaged in that at this time. Acceptance of gifts and grants, we've received quite a bit of grants through the Valley Unified Service Center. Acceptance of and expenditure of state and federal funds. No state or federal funds go directly to the service center. They go to your local school district, ED 279. So that's kind of a moot point. We do develop policies. We can borrow for working capital, but we have not. We have bonding power, but we are not going to exercise it. And no transfer of responsibility for provision of a free public education. This agreement does not transfer to the regional service center any school's administrative unit's responsibility. So basically, we can't take over for what Madawaska can't provide, or what 33 can't provide, or 27 can't provide as a district with regards to free public education.
Ben, under authority to borrow for working capital,
Yeah.
what would be an example of a need we may?
If we were to have received that regional school, we would have had the authority to as a service center to make a loan for any additional costs. We probably wouldn't have done that. We probably would have worked it out between the school units, but we do have that authority.
So is that something we could remove out of here? Do we need that in here anymore?
I'm trying to think. In the future, you may want to borrow for a shared central office. That might be something that may come up in the future, and I'm not sure. I'm just throwing that out there because that's always been a vision of Valley Unified, to have a shared central office. Other than that, I don't know what else we would borrow for. Lucy, can you?
This particular paragraph also refers to the assessment that each district is paying to the regional service center. So in the event that a district can't fulfill their monthly payment, we could go out and borrow the funds to cover them, but it must be repaid within 1 year. So it's basically just kind of like
A credit card.
a credit card.
That's what I was thinking, if somebody, fund member just couldn't fulfill their obligation. My only concern with those two items is like the bonding authority, and not that we would go that route, but the fact that, in most instances, we go to the voter ultimately for a borrow, if I remember correctly.
At the VUESC level, you can't go directly to the voter. It has to go through each district's
Gotcha.
voting power.
Okay,
And another example would be, because we receive state funds directly, if for some reason the state says we're not going to give you as much, they pull some back, we might be short for the funding that we need for the budget. This is an example of where we might go borrow to offset a reduced revenue that we were anticipating.
So I would think, short of removing those, that they should at least be a 7/9 vote,
Instead of 2/3. Right, I think right now they say 2/3.
2/3, yeah.
We could have that 7. Anybody see anything else? If you do notice something afterwards, shoot me an email and I'll put it in my notes. Lucy's ready.
Okay, on your sheet, you have the big sheets and in the folded. Right in front of you, underneath your agenda, you have big sheets. And you have a little packet of staples, shorter, smaller sheets. We'll start with the smaller one. The first item that you have is a single sheet that lists, that shows what the calculated state share is going to be for the VUESC for this year. They
Ben,
start executive salary.
Yeah, Robert, I was just trying to write to you. What email do you want me to send you some photos?
use the Northern Light, please.
Okay, can you type it in the chat and I'll send it there?
So they look at the executive director's salary and benefits, and then they calculate what 55% of that would be. And they apply that against the state average for the superintendent's salary, average 55% of the average superintendent's salary for the state. But the one at the state level includes part-time superintendents as well. So it reflects a much lower state average, and that unfortunately is what they fund us at. The second line of funding is based on our Time Clock Plus and our accounting software. They do fund that at 100%. The student information session is the Power School. It's not reflected in our funding because the Department of Education pays that directly to Power School. They do fund it on our behalf, but it doesn't come through us directly. So the anticipated state funding for this year is $125,427. Last year's was $123,418, so about a $2,000 increase. Now we'll go to the little packet. The first thing that I do is I look at the cost share and how there will be distributed amongst the units. The cost share is based on 50% of the attending students, based on what is reported on the 8279. And the other 50% is based on valuations. So I fill in those figures based on each individual district's ED279, and I come up with the percent of pupils and the percent of valuation. And I apply 50-50. So Madawaska's this year will be 33.7% contribution. MSAD 33s will be 15.51. And MSAD 27 is 50.79. And if you flip the sheet, you have last year's contributions. So Madawaska has dropped by 0.2%. MSAD 33 upped by 0.5%, primarily because of the student, the evaluation. And MSAD 27 decreased slightly by probably about 0.2%. So the third sheet is a summary of the anticipated revenue. So the first line is the proposed operating budget, and I will show you what that is on the big sheets. We are proposing going from 694,553 to 730,020. The budget itself is increasing, but the contribution by the member municipalities or the member districts will not be increasing, or not by much in the case of one district. The anticipated revenues, I anticipate at least a carry forward of 40,000. That's what I plan on applying towards this current year. So total anticipated revenues for this year will be 166,427 as compared to 123 from last year. The last sheet is a quick snapshot of what the budget is. The details are on your big sheets. This is a summary by cost center, by article that I have to report to the Department of Ed. And the first column subtotal, that's the proposed total budget. The second column is the carry forward. So I've divided it by line items. The reimbursement line is the state funding that we'll be receiving for the executive salary and the financial software. So the total column is what we will be going to the districts for each member's assessment. And the last three columns show the percent applied to that assessment value. So MSCD 27's proposed budget would be reduced by $5,200. MSAD 33s will be increased slightly by 1,058, primarily because their percent increases slightly, and Madawaska's would be reduced by about $3,400. So if we go to the big sheets, now you can see which line items we're proposing some increases or decreases. So the four columns A, B, C, and D are your last year's budget, your proposed budget for 21-22, the difference, and then the percent difference. So in the Board of Education section, I left pretty much the same. There is still a line item in there for $25,000 for legal services. Where we are still negotiating the ILA, I don't know where that's going to go. So I left that in there. That's something that you can choose to leave in or reduce slightly, but I don't know that I would touch it again this year. We have a carry forward. It's not as if we're going to the towns for more money for this. It's just, I think we need to hold on to it for a bit. The second section, the executive administration, the increases you see there are increases in salary and benefits. I'm proposing an increase in salary of about 5%. Health insurance, I always start with a 10% increase. You're not seeing much of a difference here because last year we had increased the budget by 10% and the health insurance came out at 0. So this is really the budget in 2021 already reflected the 10% increase in health. So there's just a slight increase for actual costs. Same idea for the central services, the third section at the bottom. That's the central offices. That's my salary and benefits. And there's a slight increase in the purchase professional software. One is Time Plus. Because the EPL, the Earned Paid Leave Law came into effect, we're using our Time Plus software to track hours for our coaches, our subs and whatnot. So we're actually using it more than we were previously, and it's making our tracking for EPL and our accrual really easy. The second one is the bottom, you'll see technology, the 35,000 line going to 36,900. That's our ADS Pro Fund software. That's our financial and accounting and payroll software. Every year that increases by 5%. Flip to the bottom page. The vehicle and student transportation, those are ones for the transit and ones for the van in the event that we need repairs or a few maintenance items. I left that the same because we didn't spend anything this year. It probably just moved from one parking garage to the next, seeing as we didn't go anywhere. And the bottom section, the food services operation, the one thing that became very clear this year is our food services director was very underpaid for what we asked of her this year. The food services were rock stars when it came to what we did for our kids. So partway through the year, we did adjust her salary up to 40,000. She was at 35. And then the 42 reflects the proposed increase of an additional 5%. So the circled number, the $730,020 is the proposed total budget for Valley Unified. If you look at the pink column, that's where I'm applying the anticipated state revenues. The green column, I'm applying the 40,000 carry forward. And column G is where these local assessments to the town, to the school districts. And then the next three sections, the I, J, and K is calculating the 50% based on attending students. L, M, and N is the 50% calculation based on valuation. And the very last three columns, O, P, and Q, are the two of those things together. The 50-50 come up. So the very last three columns at the very bottom show that we would be asking 286, 249 from MSAD 27, a $5,200 decrease, 87,385 from MS80 33, 1,058 increase, and 189,959 from Madawaska, almost a $3,400 increase.
Lucy, how many people are in the executive administration salaries?
Executive administration cover Ben, Giselle, and Peter. There's only 5 people in this in this budget. The other shared services are all covered in the individual districts' budgets because the cost share is not 50-50. We may have, like, Sharon's salaries is shared 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. The music may be shared partway, just a different cost sharing. So it's easier to keep them at the district and share them that way than to put them all through here and try to decipher who's who.
So you're doing that on this through the VU because of the 50% share, so we can maximize that rather than putting.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the 50%, the 55% executive salary,
Right.
that has to go through here.
Right.
If we didn't have that, we couldn't exist. And yes, we're maximizing the full potential of that. One of the options that they tried to convince us to do was to keep a portion of the superintendent's salary in the individual district and only reflect. And we said, no, that doesn't make sense, because when you operate an executive director, you do the full job regardless of what. You don't separate, hey, I'm going to spend half an hour here and there. So we are actually able to maximize every penny that they can offer us in that respect.
There are 2, if I'm not mistaken, there are 2 in the shared services. There's the superintendent services that we're talking about now, right? That we get up to 50% from the state, and then there's another category too, right? Or a couple.
The two amounts that we get from the state is based on the executive director, and that's Ben's salary and benefits only.
Yep.
And the other is the financial software and the Time Clock Plus. There's no other salaries that we get funding from the state.
And the student information.
And the student, they're paying that directly.
Thank you.
So seeing salary increases, how's that? I'm just thinking about negotiating on teacher contracts and everything, if we're giving administration raises.
Well, and the majority of us, 4 of us come from SAD 27. In 1819, the teachers got an average of 5.5% average, and men got 2. 1920, teachers got 4.1% average, admin got 5 because we were just starting Cal Unified. 2021, teachers got an average of 2.6, admin got 1.6. So when you look at that on a cumulative basis, so in 1819, that 5.5 repeats itself 3 years. The 4.1 repeats itself 2 years, and the last one is 2.6. Teachers got an average, got a total of 27.3% increase. Admin got 17.6. We work as hard as they do, and even harder. And to be honest, that made me reduce it.
If I'm not mistaken, SAD 27 had a pay adjustment to bring us more, or bring us closer to what the Madawaska teachers were making.
They did in the 1890, those 2 years, the 5.5 and the 4.1.
That's why.
That's why, but it's still an increase.
Right.
Every year, the teachers get a step, whether they get, and when they report back to you, it's, we got 2%. What they got was a step plus 2%, and the step is usually where between 2 and 3%, and in some cases, some teachers get 6 or 7%, based on which level they are at. So this is an average of 5.5. So some got more, some got less. But administrators, they don't have a salary scale, so we never get the step. It's strictly the straight percent. It is always less.
Any other questions for Lucy? Your motion to accept, we're voting on this, right?
It is, the exact language, does have March 15th. It must be approved by a 7/9 vote. Because we don't have 9 members here, it has to be a 2/3 vote. The math is behind that, but in the event the board of directors fail to approve an annual budget by March 15th, the executive director shall call an emergency meeting of the board of directors to be held no later than March 31st, at which an annual budget must be approved. If the annual budget for the regional service center is not approved by March 31st, the latest budget approved by the board of directors shall be automatically considered the operating budget for the ensuing fiscal year.
So do I have a motion to accept the budget rules?
Yes, I move that we approve the 21-22 Valley Unified Budget as presented.
We have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Mr. Castonguay? Anybody have any questions, comments? All those in favor of the presented budget?
Yeah, Robert, you voted, yeah, you did.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Louis, seconded by Mr. Castonguay.
Next meeting is, after we approve all budgets, so it's, June 7th. Just pick up your calendar, right?
That's gonna be here before you know it.
Just for clarification, that one motion as far as the shared services.
Yeah.
Now that we're putting the budget behind us.
Yeah.
We will probably be revisiting that in June as far as working out the minor details.
Yeah.
And maybe readdressing the governance issue, which is not going to be solved overnight, obviously, in one meeting.
My goal, if you'll allow me, moving forward, my goal is to try to make this work for everyone. We can do that, but we're going to all have to agree that there will be some concessions made. Nobody wants to be a partner that's just being dragged along. I think we all want to be equal partners in sharing what we can do. Remember, this is about kids, so I think we can do this.
Everyone?
Thank you.